to record it. Okay, now we're live. So tonight we're going to talk about Utopia. Last week we talked about dystopias, so similar topics, but I think this was, I thought when I was planning it out that this was a natural consequence of talking about dystopia, sort of trying to talk about what's utopia in the first place, because dystopia, it's an inversion of utopia, right? So the first question really is a very simple one. So where does that, why are we so interested in utopias and dystopias? Where does this come from? And why are we, I guess that's a kind of a second question, but it's related. Why do we seem to be more interested in dystopias than we are in utopias? Because, and that is demonstrated not only by the success of a number of movies and books and video games that are all dystopian, not utopian, but also by the fact that we started talking about dystopias before we even talked about utopias. So why are we more interested in dystopias than utopias? But also, where does this all come from? Why are we so interested in this concept of like a perfect society? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I feel like society has made so many technological advances over the past, couple centuries. We live a much more comfortable life. We don't have to go through as much hardship as we used to, and yet somehow it doesn't feel like it got us everything that we may have expected, and it feels like a lot of us still are in like we don't feel like a lot of us feel like we're still in a fairly unpleasant situation, or that we didn't get to where we thought we would. So I feel like maybe that's part of the fascination with utopias. When I was younger, I feel like I thought a lot more about utopia. Like when I was in high school, I would always think about like, what would a perfect society be like? But I feel like as I've gotten older, I kind of feel like I think more about dystopias. But yeah, I don't know.
I like what Raul was saying right before we went live, is that, one person's utopia might be somebody else's dystopia, and it's not so universal. And I think that's why, like you were saying, Michael, like why kibbutzim were initially so successful is because everything was voluntary. Like they weren't forcing people to join their communes. Like they're like, hey, we're gonna go and build these communities. The only people who were forced into it were their children, who, any kids who grow up, either whether it's on a kibbutz or like one of these hippie communes out west, like they usually grow up and they're like glad to be out of that.
Yeah, no, actually, I totally agree with both of you. I think the reasons why utopia is kind of so hard to sustain is that people have different ideas as to what is perfection. So what's perfect, what's the perfect society to one person might be very unpleasant to another. And when you get that conflict, it's hard to maintain perfection.
Yeah. And I think the other reason that, one reason why people sort of like to talk about dystopia more than utopia, aside from the attraction of watching a horror movie, is that most people pretty much have said, well, utopias are really, really unattainable. But dystopia, it still might happen. There's no guarantee that we might not end up in a dystopic world. Even though, on the other hand, we know that utopia is or at least most of us think that utopia is a pipe dream. So that's why we don't put much mental energy into that anymore. But the fear of descending into a dystopic situation is, I think, real for most people. But yeah, I want to go back to utopia. That's what we're talking about.
Well, but I do think that what you just mentioned is interesting, and it is very relevant as well, because that's the second question I asked, and I think it helps to illuminate the first one. But let me ask you something as a follow-up to what you just said. Don't you think I guess you were talking about fear. So don't you think the underlying sentiment beneath those ideas is different? So what makes us think about dystopia is fear, like you said.
Yeah.
But when you said that, I also thought, well, what makes us think about utopia is more like hope,
Right.
hope for a better future.
Sure.
So is it would it be a crazy thing to say that perhaps fear is a little bit more powerful in our conscious? Usually we are more motivated by fear than we are motivated by hope, and that's why we are kind of like drawn towards these ideas that are motivated by fear and similar sentiments.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. That's why we have to keep telling everyone, tell ourselves to be more hopeful, be more, look at always look at the bright side, because I think the default mode for people, for human beings, is to be fearful, and there are evolutionary reasons why that is the case, because the fearful person will not investigate the bush where a tiger might be hiding, right?
Mm-hmm.
While the non-fearful one will say, "Oh, what's going on here?" And that's the end of you.
Yep.
Well, though, I don't know. That's defining fear and bravery. Like, two people could be fearful. The person who's not fearful might be the one who gets eaten by the tiger.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
the fearful one will not investigate the bush that's kind of trembling. And the one who's not that fearful might say, "Hey, what's going on here? It must be something interesting." And then it turns out it's a lion or some kind of predator behind,
There are both can be true though. I mean, there's also evolutionary reasons why we are brave in certain circumstances, or why we do have courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It helps us. I guess if you have to go to war, if one culture is like really brave and like willing to do it, and the other's like scared, they're not going to last very long. So yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I think it's also the age group. One age group is I don't know if it's just apocryphal or whatever, but they say that somebody in the U.S. government proposed raising the draft age to 23, I think, rather than 18. And supposedly the general said, "No, we want to keep it at 18, because 18-year-olds will run up a hill and assault a machine gun nest, while 23, 25-year-old soldier will say, nah, you do that."
And that's true also for children, because I read that children soldiers are really some of the best soldiers these days. When you go into like like African warfare and all that stuff, more of a like warlords kind of thing.
Mhm.
But they love the children soldiers because they have no fear, or
Right.
they have very little. You can indoctrinate them to a degree that is they'll be much less fearful than a regular adult. They'll just kind of like see it as a game. They don't really understand the consequences quite like we do, adults do.
Yeah,
That's very interesting and very sad at the same time, but
right.
It is
pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
well,
I guess
you're young, you have so less of a sense of mortality. I mean, it's so much easier to be like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we were all 18-year-olds once, and we did really stupid things, right? It's like I look back and say, "Oh my God, I did that."
Well, yeah, our sense of risk assessment abilities are not as good.
It's flawed, yeah.
Yeah, and the older you get, the better you get at it. But
as your prefrontal cortex develops, then get saner. But
No, it's quite interesting that the meaning of word utopia. So it originally was meant not the good society or good place. It was non-place,
yeah,
and there were actually two versions, like utopia, and another version, the same word plus the first letter was e, like it sounds the same, utopia, but first originally it meant like non-place. And I was like reading a little bit about the concept, about the book, and watched some lecture, and the man was talking like this guy's name, Raphael Hithloday, actually means like Raphael, it's a healer of God, and Hithloday means skillful speaker of nonsense. And this whole idea of utopia was supposed to be, it's not just an ideal place, it's also was a critique of modern society, which Thomas More lived in. And so it like this guy who was talking about this book, he basically trying to attack this idea that Thomas More was a socialist, and he tried to propose that he tried to not just make people envisage like the best ideal place, but it was also like irony and satire on modern society, rather than just an attempt to make the best possible society and create some kind of social project where people may join and try to build something.
right.
Yeah,
That sounds like my type of utopia, and a utopia of the absurd, that is paradoxal and ironic, but somehow functional.
Yeah, and also like this idea, I try to think about, try to connect it with different ideas like paradise or utopia and paradise. They basically like the same ideas, though paradise is more like something unattainable or something that you don't experience in life, whereas utopia, you may build like utopia on earth. And these social movements which started appearing after like this book was written, so basically they were trying to build a paradise on earth. So it's kind of funny when you look at it from this perspective. For example, the idea of death and the idea of utopia, they're kind of the same. So you may imagine that we all, at some moment, we all are going to be in this place, like we all are going to die, and death is like ultimate state of non-being, and it's also nowhere. So it's like very, very, very close to the meaning of this original concept, like no, the place which doesn't exist.
Yeah, I didn't know that utopia came from. I thought it was an older word, but I don't know if you guys all know. I didn't know. I did some reading before we started, and it was created by Sir Thomas More.
Yep.
For his 1516 book Utopia, which is called Utopia. And yeah, it's like what Vladimir is saying. It means basically nowhere in Latin. It was written in Latin, even though it was written by English speaker Thomas More, because it was written in 1516.
Yeah.
But so utopia, the concept of utopia is only really 500 years old, but the word utopia, the concept of utopia is much older, right? You read the Plato's Republic, and it's essentially utopia, right? He's trying to define what a utopian society looks like. So we've always been fascinated by this concept. I think, if anything, perhaps at least our collective fascination for dystopia came a little bit later, and it seems that George Orwell was really the first one to really popularize, because 1984 was such a massive popular influence. And last week we talked about Brave New World, which is a little bit older than that, but I think 1984 had a bigger impact when it came out. So, but we've always been fascinated.
On Wikipedia, there are a huge list of utopian and the dystopian literature. And I tried to, I didn't read, of course, like I tried to find books which I wanted to read. And one of them was a book by Zeno, Zeno the Stoic,
Yeah.
ancient Greek philosopher, and it also was called Republic, but it didn't survive. But it seems that the book was very famous in these ancient times, and he basically tried to to mock Plato's Republic.
Mhm.
And there's some fascinating ideas. So he proposed like a common wife, so like to and the reason for that was that you will have a warm attitude towards all children. So like people have to live in one community, and wife are going to be shared by them, and then nobody knows whom
Who's the
children
father?
who's father, and like everybody feels like natural, genuine
Right.
warm
A lot of
attitude towards.
indigenous tribes kind of had it that way.
What?
I think there were indigenous tribes like Native Americans that their tribes
Yeah, and
arrangement.
Tibetans at one point, I don't know if all Tibetans, or some tribe or whatever in Tibet also practiced that. But that would be brothers would share one wife, and I think it was driven by basically a shortage of women. But yeah, but that's a
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems crazy to us, but yeah, I guess some societies in history have had a shortage of women.
Mhm.
The whole, I don't know if it's reality or not, but the myth behind the creation of Rome and how it developed. I mean, essentially, that's what it is, right? They
Right.
had no women, so they went to the nearby town and they
Yeah.
kidnapped all the women. That's how the Romans acquired their women. I don't know if that actually happened,
right.
but
Yeah.
In
that's
even
Roman history.
the recent history for the Mormons, the way that they became polygamists in their view doing the honorable thing was because there was a shortage of men, because so many men were killed. They thought it was like the honorable thing to take their widows and marry them off to men who were already married.
Well, there you go. Very convenient. It's very nice, when there's a shortage of men, if you're a man.
Yeah, but now all these polygamist societies, they basically kick out their sons as they reach adulthood, because they want to get rid of competition for women, and so yeah.
So you said, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I was always fascinated by how Judaism made kind of like the switch, because biblically, Jacob, Israel, they had multiple wives, and then they flipped to being a matriarchal society in terms of hereditary.
Right.
And I heard that the reason for that is because it's you always know who the mother is.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I was gonna say, Raul, you said before we actually started recording, I think you're saying that and Jesse was also interested in that concept, that Utopia and dystopia, well, what is I guess the biggest link between them is that what may seem like a utopia for someone might be a dystopia for someone else.
Yeah.
So maybe we can try to figure out if they're actually so different, or in other words, if utopia is indeed like an absolute concept, or it's actually something relative, because it's relative to your point of view, and it needs to be something specific. We could argue that there's no such thing really as an objective utopia, which I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that's kind of an interesting concept.
I think there's such a thing as an objective utopia. It's just unattainable, I guess. I would think of a world without strife, without pain, without all these really unpleasant things is comes close to my idea of a utopia. But whether that's attainable, probably not. You know? So I think there is an objective, at least aspects of utopia, but as you look down the more complicated aspects of it, of how people relate to each other in this utopian society, then it gets more complicated. As Jesse said, some people are perfectly fine living in a kibbutz, and others will just say, "Oh, that's just not for me," you know. And yeah. So,
Yeah, it looks as we all have a different version of ideal society, and if I can achieve my version, somebody else is going to be disappointed. Disappointed always.
Yeah.
So I would venture the very hip notion that actually the idea of the United States that was put together philosophically was the closest thing to like a shot at the utopian ideal, in a sense that it acknowledged that the sovereignty of the individual, granted the individual, like a lot of people were excluded from that, but the idea that you had this freedom to create your own little world as you saw fit, with very minimal centralized authority that would, monitor what you can and can't do in terms of, your rights to say what you want to do and, grow what you want to, like the kind of libertarian sense of freedom. Because then it's like everybody gets their own, ideally, everyone gets their own little block of clay that is their life, that they can, mold it as they choose.
Yeah, but still, it's very different from a version in the constitution and in the real world. So we try to make up certain rules which we are going to follow to build our relationships. But then in real life, we always see that there's certain problems. The reality doesn't fit to what we try to establish as a rule for it. And in any relationship, there's certain like hierarchies. So some people, like in the constitution, we are all equal, right? But in real life, some people are smarter, some people are better at something. And when you try to communicate naturally, it gets quite clear almost instantly that, like, we can treat each other as equal. We may live in a world where everybody is focused on their own, like, creating their own personal worlds, but only as long as it doesn't come to real, conflicts, real problems. Because as soon as it comes to certain problems, certain conflicts, as we have to make some decisions which are gonna affect both our lives, we start
Sure.
being not civilized. It's like become almost like animals.
I think a lot of utopias have a hard time managing change. So, like, let's say COVID happens. Like a utopia, it's like, how do you manage that? Because I mean, it's like in a market economy, it's kind of like everyone is kind of focused on their own situation and maximizing it. But yeah, utopia, if a big change comes around, it doesn't really have a plan for it often.
Mm-hmm.
And the question with authority, with power, like who possesses this decision, like the supreme responsibility for decision making, not for just one person, but for society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Like in
I think the idea too of having a life without strife, without pain, without all these unfair struggles is just unrealistic, is like essentially not human, because we've evolved from millions of years of strife and fighting and struggle. We are programmed to that, and so much of our serotonin and dopamine like responses come from overcoming these issues. Like anybody who had like a tough childhood with like weird relationships and stuff like that, like people generally tend to repeat these patterns. And in my theory, it's because you become so used to this struggle of navigating these obstacles that if you beat it, you don't have any, you're going to go and create more of them so you can solve them, unconsciously. Otherwise, it would be really boring. Right.
I mean, it's the only thing that that you've experienced, and somehow that's why children victims of abuse, a lot of them grow up to be abusers as well, right? Because it's just
or seek out relationship abusers.
I think it's worth breaking it into two questions. Do we think utopias are realistically possible? And then do we think that it's even in theory possible? Or will the human mind always find a satisfaction? Like is it even theoretically possible, or is the human mind just kind of wired to go back to being dissatisfied no matter what situation you're in?
I think it's possible on a personal level. So I mean, you may become a philosopher. This ancient concept of a philosopher, a wise man who actually lives in a world like not in a full paradise where you are ignorant of all these problems which occur in around you, but where you actually create certain environment for yourself and you can live and do something meaningful, and simultaneously you kind of this stoic idea of ataraxia where you are not attached to the reality, and when you kind of satisfied with what you have. And I guess we may use this idea determinism as well. So you basically understand that everything what's going on is not just your it doesn't depend on what you call you. It's just basically the natural state of development of the universe, and you may be satisfied with that. You may say that's like what's going on. It's there's no other way. So you kind of accept reality and live in this condition of it's hard to call it utopia, but still I think like on a personal level it's kind of attainable. So you can't make everybody satisfied with what's going on, but if you do it on your personal level, you basically may live in this state where all your it doesn't mean that you will not have negative emotions. You will still have them, and you will still have some uncertainties about your life, but you just treat them differently.
It's how you deal with adversity, right? I mean, happiness is a big topic these days. A lot of people are talking about, well, what do we do to lead to attain a happy life, and what does happiness mean? And so these concepts of hygge from I think it's from Norway. It's a concept from Norway, and then they ask, why are the Finnish so happy? The Finns, why are they apparently in surveys of happiness, they're always up there at the top as the happiest people in the world. And yeah, I agree with Vladimir that it's really not what goes on, but how you view it, how you deal with it when strife and adversity comes about.
But those countries in particular that you just gave as an example, I'm not really sure that's a very clarifying example for us, just because those societies just tend to be the best societies in the world. If we can talk about a utopian society, I mean, there's a good argument. It's not, I mean, certainly, you can't say objectively those are the best countries in the world, but in all the rankings of quality of life, I mean, out of 10 countries, you're going to get 4 or 5 Scandinavian Nordic countries, so that kind of like, you know, it's hard to say if it's their state of mind, or I think maybe it's more likely that it's just the fact that they live in a very good society. They live in a society where they have a very high quality of life.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's also just kind of a cultural attitude too, that is they have a good quality of life, and they have a general cultural attitude toward, like, I would say, you know, acceptance, I suppose, of, yeah, this is good, this is good enough, you know.
You know, contentment.
Yeah, if you could have both, I mean, it would be fantastic, right? Maybe they have both, and that's why they're so happy. I don't know. Like, this is just we're just trying to figure it out, right? But I'm just saying it's not a great, like, it's difficult in that case to say, because they have some amazing societies, right? Like, objectively, in terms of like. Basically, their outside world is very good. The place where they live, their society is very good. And
but
their frame of mind might be good or bad, right? So, but it's hard to say in that case. Like, some people that live in poverty, in abject poverty, for us, abject poverty, and that we see, like maybe some tribes in Africa that seem at first glance like incredibly poor, but people are actually happy, that exists. And in that case, it seems that it's the frame of mind is the most important aspect.
I was about to say,
it's hard to say. I mean,
I was about to say, in these surveys of happiness, it's not a measure of their standards of living, their economic standing, or it's basically a survey of the people's view of their circumstances. Whether are you happy? Basically, it's are you happy or not? But it's not just that one question. And some of those countries that rank high are third world countries, you know, and so yeah, utopia is, I guess, a state of mind, right? You know.
Well, I don't know if it's a state of mind. I think it's very, and what we're talking about, yeah, it's utopia, but it's also, we're talking about happiness, what makes someone happy. And I do think, well, there are essentially two ways it can go, right? Either you're happy because you have good circumstances. And in this case, if we're talking about society can provide people good a good infrastructure, a good life for most people. So that's one thing, which is the actual reality of it. And then there's another thing, which is the state of mind of people, you know, the way they look at things. If they're going to look at the cup, you know, half empty or half full, right? So, but those are two different things. And it's kind of, as far as being happy, I guess it's sort of a combination of both. It's going to be a combination of both. I don't know which one is more important. I mean, if things are like very dire, I mean, if you live in North Korea, I imagine, I don't live in North Korea, but I imagine if I lived in a situation, or like 1984, right? Because you read the book 1984, you imagine like most people in that society probably wouldn't be happy if they were in that situation. Right. So in that society, it's very difficult to be happy just because it's such a terrible society for people in general. But you could also,
unless they define happiness as, you know, this miserable state of existence.
Well, yes,
you use double speak.
It's a possibility, right? That happy actually means just being watched by Big Brother. I'm super happy because Big Brother is here, you know, because they redefine words.
Well, I think 1984, most of the people were happy. That's why the rebels, the dissidents, were a very small, you know, segment of society. But then again, maybe they killed off most of the dissidents. That's why, you know.
Well, I don't think they were happy. I think they were. They had agreed to live in that society because the alternative was worse, as the protagonist finds out, right?
Yeah, you might be right. You know, been a while since I've read it.
I propose to talk a little bit about, like, you know, the real model of an ideal society. What do we actually think about? You know, how can we imagine, like, where do we want to live? Like, let's suppose that we're going to build a utopia. So what is going to be like, on different levels, like education, laws,
Yeah,
you know,
I think
relationship between, men and women.
yeah, it's a fun exercise.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, there, like you just said, right? There are several aspects to that. So it's hard to just say one thing, but
Yeah, almost like from education, for example.
Yeah.
I was thinking about utopian education this week, and I realized something. I wouldn't say I realized. I just remembered. In school, for example, in every culture, we have different like writers or thinkers who are we supposed to. And in Russia, we have these people who lived like 2 centuries ago, like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy,
Tolstoy, yeah.
Turgenev, yeah. And we're brainwashed from the very early age to read all these writers, and we don't like. The problem is that let's suppose that you want to build a utopia, and you want to educate your children, and you like read like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. You understand that these people were actually, important for. If you read them, you like become kind of aware of what's going on in the world, and probably you need to teach children to understand their ideas. So therefore you have to force them to read them. But the problem with that is that to understand these ideas you have to be at least 20, 30 years old, since when you read it as a child it's just nonsense.
Right.
no
Yeah.
nobody understands like at the age of 10 what was going on in like War and Peace, or in Idiot of Dostoevsky, or Crime and Punishment. Just sounds like a stupid fairy tale. But when you grow older, you may understand it. But the problem is, again, you want to educate your people, and you want them to read the best books, and you understand that these best books, they must be read at certain age.
Right.
So how to deal with that? I mean, I think it's a huge problem in education that we are like as children, we are forced to learn things that we don't understand, and it creates a certain we
Right.
call it like the state of helplessness. So you basically try to read something, try to understand, and you develop disgust to certain ideas, to certain views, and then later, like when you finish the school, you don't approach these ideas again. So you just stop. Like many people who read these books like in childhood, they never continue reading. They never continue, going on in this direction. Whereas those who did, like me myself, I didn't read books in school. I hated them. Well, I read them when it was necessary for a school program, but still just partially. And at the end of school, I started reading, started understanding these books. And wow, that's so amazing that I actually I didn't spoil my personality by trying to download all these ideas and books when I was a child. So I didn't have this hatred. Okay, once again, like education, like what type of information must be, not must be, but what type of information we have to present to children, like to raise a new generation.
When I was in school, I think my teachers did it on purpose. They were trying. I'm sure they got together and tried to figure out which ones would be the most boring books that you could inflict on children, and they would probably have a laugh doing this. And then it was absolutely horrible, like the kind of stuff that I had to read. It was so boring.
I think that's such an example of kind of the failed dystopia too, because it's this idea like, oh my God, I figured this out. Like, this is so brilliant. I got it. Like, here's the key to happiness. But it's really, you're saying this is the key to my happiness. This is me having my light bulb go off. And the, natural human reaction is like, oh, I have to share this with everybody. Yeah. And if I'm in a place of power, even better, because I can just stuff it down their throats.
Right.
I didn't come by this knowledge. I didn't come by the appreciation for Dostoevsky or, you know, whatever it is by having somebody like stuff it down my throat. It's something that I kind of like, oh, I like came upon it at a certain time. And when you try to take your ideals and like put them upon like huge masses of people, it inevitably backfires, even if it has the best of intentions, and you know, like
Yeah, but
that's wisdom.
Yeah, but that's what we do, like in creating schools and education programs. We still must teach something, and you still have to choose certain ideas and certain people who you suggest that they were kind of ideal source of information for children, for kids. But once again, in my life, I remember the moment when I read like Kant and Schopenhauer, and I was thinking, wow, if only like everybody will, as you said, like everybody will read these books, they all figure out like what's going on, and we might just create like perfect society. Everybody will understand each other. But then, it's kind of naive perspective, so you understand that.
But I do think that education is a key part in creating a very good society. I think, for example, I was talking about the Scandinavian societies. I don't know if they're the best societies in the world, but they're certainly, I think, some of the most accomplished or some of the best. What?
Go on.
No, and I mean the cornerstone of those societies to a great extent, I mean, is their education. They have very good education, and I mean, I've had I used to know a lot of Swedish people. So I went to especially when I lived in France, I had French classes, and Swedish people mostly got it for free. They were sent to France for free to study French. I mean, most of the Swedish people I knew, they didn't really pay anything. They just got money from the government to go to France and study French. And they were very like well-educated people. And this is a general rule in Scandinavian societies. They're very egalitarian, but also people like have a very high level of education.
Yeah.
You can
I
see
think college is free too there.
Yeah,
right?
college is free.
Yeah.
Just by that example, right? I mean, what other country in the world, like sends people to France to study French, and study French language and culture, because the country thinks that will elevate their population, But it does. It absolutely does. I mean, that will make, things like that will create a better population, will create people that are more prepared, that are more enlightened, for lack of a better word, travel, knowledgeable about things. And that's also like particularly important for democracy, for democratic societies, because in democratic societies, and I think, well, maybe we won't jump straight into the politics side because we talk about education, but I do think that for a democratic society to work well, you do need to have a good education.
Yeah. Because
you are putting power in the hands of people, right? If you're putting power in the hands of an uninformed mob or uneducated mob, the consequences are probably not going to be great.
Right.
It's the tyranny of the democracy. If you don't have educated people, democracy probably won't work all that well.
And it's not just education. It's really a deep understanding of what makes a democracy work.
True.
And I think a lot of people, even though they say, "Oh, we believe in democracy," they don't really know what that means to be in a democratic society and to maintain it and to keep it that way. Because a lot of people think democracy is majority rules. Well, no, that's not it. But yeah, just.
No, I mean, that's a good point. I think having a good civical education, I think if you're in a democracy, I think having a good understanding of the civics, of what it means to be a citizen, to have a good civic understanding.
Right.
I think that is very important in a if you're living in a dictatorship, obviously not, but in a democracy, it's very important.
This is why destroying the educated and taking over education is essential for every like dystopian, the rise of any dystopian authoritarian, society is, by simply saying, oh, well, you might be educated, but you were educated by the old system, so you don't actually know anything. Says people who've never studied the old system, don't know anything really about it, except general, whatever slogans or talking points, and can thereby just dismiss the complete, all of the stuff in history. And I don't know, I always loved history. I was going to be a history teacher, and I didn't, but I could see why people hated it, because they're like, oh, all these like names and dates, and
it was so taught wrong.
Irrelevant. And for me, it was taught mostly at home, so I was really engaged with history. Was in the classroom because I saw it as an epic, as this ongoing epic that is still affecting our lives now. Yeah. So the idea that somebody that has any kind of a, educated, informed opinion about politics and current events, but they don't know the history that led to it, is kind of dangerous. And I think it's, that's why I love dystopias, because it's
Jesse,
I can imagine it to be a very threat.
Well, I think that's a good point. That actually goes back to the topic of education. I think history should be a very important topic in education,
absolutely,
especially in a democracy. Because I agree with what you said, Jesse. Like, I think history, it's very important that people have an understanding of history.
Yeah, and history is written by by different points of view, not just your own society's point of view. I think it is very beneficial to see history as other people see it, and even your adversaries, quote unquote. About the educational system. I think I'm aghast at people who say that we should not, forget about the humanities, forget about the well, they think liberal arts is the humanities, but liberal arts is wider than the humanities. Just think that that the educational system should just focus on STEM, and I think that that's a very misguided notion. That the humanities is, I think, pretty important, and especially history, I think, is one of the more one of the key fields in the humanities, and we need to continue.
Well, if you want to educate people that are good citizens, again, it depends on the democratic, it depends on the system of government. In the democratic system, I think in particular, in the authoritarian governments, maybe I'm not so sure it's that important.
No,
But if you want, when you're putting power in people's hands, like rulers shouldn't be good rulers. Rulers can't be good rulers without a good understanding of history. Yeah. Because they need to understand like what came before. If not, it's tunnel vision. Like you don't understand what came before, so you don't really know how you got to the place where you're at. So, and that creates, that's not a good place to start ruling anything. You need to have an understanding of how things came into place. And in democracy, everybody rules to a certain extent. So everybody needs to have some sort of understanding of how things came into place.
And this is what we actually disagree about most of the time. I mean, like on a social level. So what is history? What was going on like 100, 200 years ago, 300 years ago? What kind of books should we read? Should we read Bible and understand everything like what's said there? Or should we read some enlightened thinkers? Or should we abandon them all and start reading only like modern, Harry Potter, whatever is going on here.
I'd say you have to read everything. Of course, there are constraints, but as I said, you have to see history not just from your society's point of view, but from other societies' point of view. Like, for example, when I want to read the news, when I want to read the news that's going on about what's going on in the United States, I just don't look at the New York Times or the Washington Post. I make sure that I look at, for example, the Guardian to see what it's like from that point of view, or some other English-speaking papers from other countries. Yeah.
In other words, read Plato, but not only Plato, but Aristotle, and also skeptics as well,
right? Yeah,
and Stoics,
and Epicurus.
Epicurean, yeah.
Just
Also, if we're talking still about education, how to improve, I think, and this is kind of like a little bit. I'm not sure this happens everywhere, but I used to, I spent some time, some years teaching here in the United States and in schools in the United States, and I mean, there's a big problem with discipline in general.
Yeah.
I mean, the level of discipline is so low, really, that I mean, I don't really, I think that what education is not really education, almost like with the level of discipline that exists in American schools. You can't really teach much with the level of education. The level of discipline that American schools have. And so I don't know if this applies to other countries. It wasn't like that when I went to school in Portugal back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It was a completely different scenario. So we did have some discipline. So when I first started going to school here and teaching here, I mean, I was absolutely aghast because I couldn't believe that the level of, like, I had never seen, like, I didn't think of school as a place where, people could be so undisciplined. It was a crazy idea to me at first. I had to adapt to it.
Wait, were you a teacher or an administrator? I forgot.
I was a teacher.
What did you teach?
Well, I was like a substitute teacher most of the time, and then I started teaching Spanish classes. But I also taught, because I was a substitute teacher for quite a while. I had, I did different kinds of classes. I did special education. I did physical education, and there are some schools better than others.
Right.
But the majority of school, because I was going from school to school, I mean, the majority of schools that I saw was absolutely, like, I was shocked. Honestly, I was shocked not having gone to like high school here or middle school. I was absolutely shocked. Like, I couldn't believe that was what middle school and high school looked like, honestly, in Minnesota. Like, I was completely, I didn't have that impression from movies, because you look at, I thought, like, actually it was going to be super cool. Hey, American high school and everything, but I was just shocked, like, there was no discipline at these schools whatsoever. Like, how does anyone learn anything?
Are you talking no discipline as in unruly, or even as no discipline to the point of just downright dangerous, threatening behavior?
Both, but just kids. Like, if teachers are going to teach something, I mean, the students should have to listen, right? Or
right. Yeah.
There should be some sort of respect for teachers and for what they're teaching, and actually they should actually be doing something. And what I saw most of the times was like not at all that. And also the fact that here, I was also shocked about the fact that people just grades were different. Like growing up for me, like we actually had to study a lot to pass tests and all that stuff. And if you didn't pass, you didn't pass. I mean, they would flunk you, you know, you wouldn't like go to the next grade.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, it certainly happened if, you know, but here it's like, oh, you know, they don't pass. Oh, they'll give them another chance and another chance and another chance, you know, and maybe they'll study a little bit and then they'll kind of pass them, you know. There's no, I don't know how people can graduate high school not actually doing the studying and having the level.
Right.
Well, this is the answer to why, you know, when you call every chance the corporation can to outsource something to another country, they will. And you know, we have a 10% unemployment right now, but there's a huge labor shortage. It's just very difficult for employers to find people who they can rely on and trust to like do seemingly simple tasks.
Yeah. The skills gap. Yeah.
Skills gap. Yeah, and it's because of that. It's because, you know, has anybody seen The Wire, the television show The Wire?
Yes, a little bit. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen like the first.
Okay. The 4th season's the best, but you know, they kind of cover how like police have you know, they juke the stats, so they, you know, when election cycles come by, they know to not process crime so that they can say, oh, look, crime is going down. And then it's like with the educational system too, it's like, well, we're not actually educating people any better, but we just lower the standards so that we can say, oh, look, these kids are all at, you know, the proper levels they need to be.
Yeah. I was shocked by that. I was shocked by that because they're constant, like the standards are so low that, you know, like from I saw like things that, you know, if they'll just like write a little bit in a test, you know, they'll pass, you know. It's just like my idea of education and the idea of education that I encountered here was certainly like completely different.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's like that in American colleges. Because, you know, a lot of American colleges are like very highly respected institutions, you know, some of the best universities in the world. So I even had like trouble wrapping my mind around the fact that how will these people be able to go to college, a good college, a good university, and actually, you know, do well, like pass. Like I don't know how that process works. Maybe there's like an interim school that they go to. I don't know, but
No,
I gotta go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was gonna say I grew up in another country, right? And one of the impressions I get that in the United States, typically, I'm not saying everyone, it seems that education is not as valued as it is, for example, in my country. Like I know that people, you know, families in our country, the goal is, you can do everything, sacrifice everything, go abroad, find a job, get a good income so that you could send your kids to a good school and then be able to get to college and you know, and sometimes that would be the first generation of college goers because the parents went abroad and worked as nurses, doctors, some as domestic workers, just sacrifice everything to be able to send their kids to college and get them educated. And I don't feel that there is in the United States that striving for their kids to provide a good education. It's more like, oh yeah, go to high school and get your degree. And a lot of people I've heard is, oh, I'm done with high school and it's up to them if they want to go to college or not. You know, and I'm certainly not going to pay for it, you know, but I don't know how the breakdown is, how many families feel that way, how many families are, you know, are.
Yeah. But I just wanted to, I'm sorry I talked about this so much. I was just trying to emphasize the point that, and this is not something that I thought before, but I understood as a teacher here that you need a certain level of discipline if you're actually going to teach something. So I think that is kind of like almost like one of the conditions for teaching to actually occur, for education to actually function. And I heard Bertrand Russell, talk about this. And I imagine like his schools, like what he was talking about was a completely different level. But he said that he thought that the level of discipline in British schools was not good enough, that you needed a certain level of discipline in order to get good education. But I suspect, the level he was referring to was not what I'm referring to. It was much higher. But the general point is valid. Like one of the things that you do need for education is you need to have at least some discipline. At least teachers should be allowed to kind of like do their job, and have some respect from the students. There should be an environment of learning, right? What you essentially, at least you still get that in colleges, I imagine, right? Colleges and universities. That should apply also to elementary, middle school, high school. And in some sense, I think high school, middle school elementary school, middle school, and high school, that's really the most important for a society. That's the most important education, because you're forming people as well. And like Vladimir, for education, I would say there are two forms of basic education, right? One is to form the citizen, right? And I think that's a very, very important part of education if we're trying to achieve our utopian society, is to form good citizens. And then you have the other part of education, which is more like the latter part, that you're trying to teach someone a skill so they actually can have an economic activity. But I think we conflate those things too much. I think we should maybe think about them more separately, because the first part is very important, forming the citizen.
I think the first part is absolutely so important. And I think there's probably definitely conflicting goals as to what type of citizen the educational system wants to form, or is willing to form. And I mean, I moved from Israel to the United States in third grade, and I went. It was a good school. It was like Apple Valley school districts in the United States, which is one of the better school districts for sure. But there was definitely more in the United States, like this focus on like the children's feelings much more than, are you actually learning? And it's like they're always trying to balance that. And, the idea that like, well, we're going to say you tried your best, and even if you failed, we'll pass you anyway, is the led up to like, well, when I was in college at the University of Minnesota, and it was my senior year, but I had to take a 101 American history class because because of the master's program I was going to go into. And I was really kind of disturbed that we took like a whole week in a University of Minnesota college history class where she had to basically teach kids about like how to structure a paragraph, what a thesis statement was, and like, okay, so your thesis statement is this, and then the paragraph has the supporting stuff, and then that's what like, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry that there's people that don't know this, but how the fuck did you get into college if you didn't know this? Like this should have been, this was covered. They taught this to me back in middle school, and I just listened and remembered it. I don't understand how you got to college and don't know this. So it was, it's.
Writing skills is something that's not very well taught in most schools, I gather, because it's hard to teach kids to write, and a lot of,
Yeah, I graduated from school completely illiterate.
Yeah.
I mean, later I started writing like my own journals, and like it took me 6 years to learn write in my native language without mistakes. So first 6 years I basically tried to educate myself, was studying on my native language, and again it's like after school I just well I still have these notes written like in 2008. And
Right.
I can't read them myself. I can
Yeah,
read them, but it's like in a mistake in every sentence.
yeah, but
And
lucky for you, you can educate yourself, right, Vladimir? But a lot of people can't. They won't be able to acquire the skills on their own. And
yeah, I think one of the probably biggest problem in education, like especially in what we choose to teach children, it's that like old people have to decide what young people have to learn. And
right,
maybe a solution for that is going to be something like you have children, you give them certain options, and they decide by themselves what they want to read and what they want to learn, like kind of Montessori system. But
right.
I'm not sure it's going to work for every culture, but still it seems to have a good impact on Scandinavian societies. Like in Finland, for example, they like the best system of education. They basically teach according to this model. So it's not like there's the thing you have to learn. There's the choice, and you basically may find what you like, and teacher kind of, it's not somebody like an authority figure, but somebody who helps you to develop in certain direction which you pick up by your own passion or interest or whatever. I mean, it's very like, let's suppose that we again want to create like the best educational system, and we think, oh, it's all these books which we read, like we just pick up some of them and say that children must read this. But what if we just give children, like, you guys may read these kind of authors, or you may read these kind of authors, and you like a group, like if we have a class like 20, 30 people, you like a group have to decide on your own, like what are you going to read, and probably going to give more options for real engagement of students into studying. Whereas when you force somebody to say you must read this, you must learn
Right.
that, and then you have to answer, regurgitate whatever you learn.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's wasted time.
yeah. It's
Right.
even if I learn something, then it makes me hate it.
Right.
Since I may remember something, but then I see that it
It's meaningless.
doesn't apply to me. It just makes no
Yeah.
sense.
And that's one of the things I like about the American education system is that there's some flexibility in the classes you choose. Like you can choose your electives,
Right.
and even within the assignments, there's room for creativity. It may exist like that in other countries, but just from little sound bites I've heard, like some people say in other countries, it's more like rigid and rote. Like for the test today, you need to know this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. But it's hard. You have to strike a balance between learning content, and learning how to think, right? And the US might be a little tilted towards learning how to think, but you've got to think of something, right? When you're thinking, you have to think about something, you have to react to something, and maybe that's if you know how to think, but there's nothing to think about, you don't have the substantive knowledge that you could think about and react on, and so yeah, I mean we'll always be looking at at the defects of this or that.
I feel like that was kind of like me. Like, I feel like in high school, I kind of knew how to think, but I didn't know what to think about.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't like history. I didn't like English. And so like, I was really logical and like analytical, but I didn't have any historical knowledge or sort of understanding of the world to apply it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I grew up, probably the problem was the opposite. studied history, and if history is taught the wrong way, it's absolutely boring, stultifyingly boring. And then I found out later on that history is so interesting, you know. But how come they didn't do that when I was in school?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
maybe
Yeah,
just
the
again,
thing
your subjective perspective. So you grow older, you develop different, different perspectives, and
that's
you want to learn more naturally. Whereas when you were a kid, you just want to play and you don't want to do anything. Like you have especially now, you have your phone, and that's all.
No. If
I
you
always
taught
hated
history,
math, and once in a while I'd have like a really good math teacher.
right?
I would understand it. It was like, oh my god, this is kind of cool. And then I'd have a bad math teacher, and I was like, I hate math.
Yeah.
And then I took chemistry, and I'm like, chemistry is amazing. But now I have to take math with it. Like, I feel like they should. To be more effective in the American system, in my opinion, is to actually split people up a lot more based on their interests and their talents, their natural talents. So you're not like trying to force somebody to spend all their time working on something they're not good at. Like, I hate math. Why am I wasting all this time on this? Where if I'm really good at mechanics or I'm really good at art, like I should spend more time on that and less time on the things that I'm not good at.
Mhm.
I and like what you're saying before, Jesse, like it seems that they're very concerned with the students' feelings, like what they feel, what they want. And I think that it has come to a point that I mean, it's everything. It's almost like they've transferred the mentality of the customer is always right, which is a very American mentality, right? That's the mentality in schools today, which is like it's a matter of really insanity if you're coming from outside, you know, like you as a teacher, you're like serving the student, which that simply doesn't work, you know. That's
You're serving their overbearing parents.
Right.
you're serving the
that-
parents,
that-
certainly. You're
yeah.
serving the students and the
And-
parents, and they're always right.
Wrong.
They're always right.
Yeah.
The teacher is
Yeah.
always wrong. The school is always wrong. You know.
Right.
Actually, so that's why you can't flunk anybody. You can't give anyone bad grades because you're not serving them right. Yeah, like in this, according to this crazy system. You know. So of course you have to pass everybody, no matter what they do, right?
Yeah. Plus, it's that self-esteem fad that started, I don't know, about 20, 25 years ago. They got the causation wrong. They thought that if you just build up the kids' self-esteem, then they will start achieving. And turns out it's different. It's when kids start to achieve, then they build up their self-esteem. But
Exactly.
you know, they did not.
It's not the other way around.
They mistook causation for correlation for causation.
I think you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's true. I mean, that's absolutely true. And it's they got it in reverse. They got it in reverse.
I want to tie this back to the idea of utopia, though, which is, I think, you're going to do the same thing, Vladimir.
Yeah, I want to say like we need to
Yeah.
move on from education.
Yeah. Well, we need
Actually, I was
people
gonna
to
say-
redirect us.
I was thinking
Yeah.
that as well, but then I got
My
distracted.
phone is about to die, just so you guys know. So if I suddenly disappear, I gotta go.
All right.
Okay.
But yeah, to tie it into the idea of utopia, I think one of the real difficulties is I think humans are inherently somewhat of a competitive species. We want to stand out from the pack. You know, we want to show that we have an idea that's, you know, novel or, you know, above what our peers have been able to do. And I think that inherently leads to conflict because some people feel more valued, some people feel jealous, some people feel that they're not acknowledged properly. So yeah, I think that like in a utopian society, often we think like everybody's equal or everyone's treated, you know, the same or valued the same, but I don't think people really like operate that way.
No. That's why I'm a big fan of Epicurus. I think if you are going to achieve utopia, I think it's a lot easier if we kind of listen to what he said, which is basically my interpretation is don't demand too many things to achieve happiness. Don't don't have your happiness be dependent on achieving, you know, or attaining things that are basically unsustainable. You know, and just learn to, happiness is, if it's not something that is sustainable, it can't be something that keeps you happy. Like, for example, if your happiness depends on, let's say, having a 3-star Michelin meal every day, you know, or then you will never achieve happiness. You know, the sort of pleasure that you get from one day of having a very good meal is not real happiness, because it leads you the next day to wishing, oh, I'm not happy because I don't have that anymore. You know,
but isn't that like, I feel like it's almost somewhat part of human nature to want to try to strive for new things, or like,
it is.
Yeah, it's part of human nature. Are we kind of happy with like status quo, with like just I guess not having a lot amount of change, and
So
just kind of living the same way over and over? Yeah.
That's why it's impossible to create utopias. And you can just achieve the state when you say everything is perfect. So you always want to move on. You always want to find something new, find some new perspectives. Even if it's like, you know, comparatively to what we had like 100 years ago, we live in a great abundance right now. So we have all, you know, we have food. We almost don't have, like, you know, in developed countries, we don't. And most countries like they are closer and closer to the standards. So we don't have problems with food. We don't have problems with, you know, shelter, and life essentially like became way more comfortable than it was before. And we, from a perspective of somebody who had to work 16, like not 16, probably 12 hours a day just to get you know, just to get food and clothes, we live in a utopia. So if you bring some, not even peasant, but, you know, just a worker from the beginning of 20th century to, you know, the place when I might work just 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I basically may have everything that people had like working 12 hours a day 100 years ago. But I guess still, like, we want to rise our standards, and probably next 100 years, you work just 1 hour, but you know, people still will say that whatever we have, it's not enough. We need more. We need to create better place. We need to create better, you know, government, you know, whatever environment.
So I was going to tie back to that. I think it's harder to add value to the world today in a way, because the more comfortable we are, the less obvious things there are that you can like do to ease people's like pain or suffering.
It's more about, like, again, a relationship, not the
not material.
Not the material stuff which we have. Not how to create like meaningful relationship that may not all people, but many people may, you know, connect to each other and do some meaningful thing. And again, it's like this lack of, you know, you can't add anything. Like, basically we create like some superfluous, you know, stuff more and more. Doesn't make any sense. And people who create them, they understand that it's like, it's all, most of it is useless, but they still create them since it's kind of like the same, you know, repeating the same process, getting more profit, whatever. And so it's meaningless. So before you work 12 hours a day, and you at least understand that it adds something to human progress. But now you work like 3 or 4, whatever, how many hours, and you're just like, it makes no sense. Yeah, you just feed yourself, but in general, whatever you do, it's like, it's not going to make life better. What's going to do what's going to make life better. It's more about,
Right.
yeah, now it's more about, kind of intellectual work.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, even in personal relationships, it's kind of harder to add value when you live in such a convenient world, because like let's say, I don't know, let's say 50 years ago, you might make dinner for I don't know, your husband or wife, and that would be like a really nice activity, whereas nowadays you could just pay money and you could get a much better dinner in like 2 seconds, or something like that. So like the fact that we can get what we want so easily makes it harder to add value in a way to relationships. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Well, I would add, taking from Vladimir Timoney's talking about a meaningful life. I've heard some speakers say, and I've also read it, that the happiest people, in fact, the people who live longer lives are outwardly focused. First of all, they have a purpose in life. Even when they're retired, they adopt a cause or something that they just lead purposeful lives, and the purposes that they choose, the causes they choose, are outwardly focused, not on them, but outwards to basically towards either helping other people or acquiring new knowledge or whatever. But it's not about improving your material circumstances or doing something that is pleasurable to you.
I wonder if that's causational or correlational, though. Like, maybe people who are happy then tend to help others. Whereas, yeah.
Yeah, but the one speaker who I listened to told me his experience was that was what changed his life. When he changed his focus after his retirement, he changed his focus from doing this for myself to doing something that hopefully benefits more than just himself. And so, who knows, your mileage might vary. Some people, it might work for some people, but it might not for some. Also, human relations, the quality of your relationship is also critical to happiness. And there are just people who are naturally happy, right? And people who are naturally discontented.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit genetic, maybe.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. And
Yeah.
also it might be in terms of the way you think, like you create certain mechanisms in your mind.
Right.
And you might have mechanisms that are gonna lead you to have happy thoughts, and you have mechanisms that are always gonna lead you to probably have negative thoughts.
Right. Yeah, because neuroscientists and psychologists who study this say that the people who, personalities, right, it's called highly but whatever, people who have high anxiety and are always, in a state of discontentment, their amygdalas, a part of the brain, it's always like hyperactive, than most people's, and that's why they're.
What do you think, guys, about like this cyber thing? So when we're becoming like more like less human and more like robots, is it going to bring change like on a social level to the degree when we create, like, maybe we'll build utopia not for humans but for this half humans,
half human, half machine,
half machine, and then a machine may basically regulate all your emotions and bring you happiness, so you may feel happy at any moment.
I think that's a good point. That's a good question, and also kind of like ties to what I was thinking while you guys were talking as well. I think that I agree that, and certainly, I mean, in terms of, I was reading about pirates, pirate history, but that led me to read about history of the 1700s. There's no doubt that our lives are generally more comfortable now than they were in the 1700s, but with that being said, if we look at the 20th century, the 20th century was not a comfortable century. A lot of bad things happened in the 20th century to a lot of people in a lot of different places. So there is a danger of becoming complacent. We've had, like, on a social level, we've had like good decades, a good string of decades. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that might lead us to think that we're good now. But I don't think that's necessarily true. Like Francis Fukuyama, I think that was his name. He famously wrote that it was the end of history in the 1990s. Everything was resolved. There were no more problems. From now on, it was going to be smooth sailing. And then
2001.
2001 happened. I mean, in the last 20 years, we've created a whole bunch of new problems. Not even like the old problems. They're not entirely resolved yet. They seem more resolved in the 90s than they seem now. So look, I mean, yes, we've done a lot of progress, but it's also true that we might have become a little bit complacent. And, Craig said that in our discussion back in the day when we were talking about progress and stuff. I agree with him. Progress is not guaranteed,
No.
It seems that it's guaranteed given our current, upwards trajectory, but I think it's not guaranteed, in absolute terms. It certainly can go down again. To tie that with what you just said, Vladimir, now we have a whole bunch of new challenges, which is the technology stuff and the artificial intelligence and environmental degradation and all that. We're going to have to learn with those things, and our utopias of the 21st century are going to have to kind of integrate those. So we're going to have to figure out, how that's going to work, right? And our utopias are going to be able to integrate that. I think right now we're dealing pretty badly with technology as a whole, as a community. So I don't know. I think that's a whole conversation to have. How do we integrate technology into our lives in a way that is utopic, not dystopian, or utopian and not dystopian, right? Right now, I think it's more dystopian. We even have Black Mirror, which is like predicting a lot of the stuff that actually happens in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still think one of the fundamental things getting in the way of a utopia is just that there's like inherent competition between people. I think people are inherently competitive to some extent. Each person wants to show they can add more value, or that they're more important in some way, and that leads to jealousy. Some people feel that they're less valued. Some people feel so I feel like that is kind of a fundamental obstacle to a utopia that is beyond sort of any level of technology, at least currently. Like, I don't think you can resolve that through having better and better technology, at least not anytime in the near future.
Well, and I would go kind of beyond that and say that technology is creating some problems, right, that we didn't have before, but that we have now, like the fact that people are like constantly addicted to technology. That is not something that isn't a problem that we had before, but it is a problem that we have now, and it's a problem that we're going to have more and more as there's more technology and it becomes more and more integrated in life, and as younger people grow, just using technology.
But even if we could avoid that, like even if we could get around the addiction to technology, I still think the obstacles in the way of a utopia are pretty deep. But yeah.
Say it again, Michael. Sorry. The what?
So like, even if we could remove all the downsides that come with technology, like the addiction, maybe it's not good to sit on the computer all day. Maybe people are on Facebook all the time, and maybe their profiles don't show who they really are, or whatever kind of issues with technology. Let's say, just as a thought experiment, let's say you could resolve all of them. Even then, I think a utopia would still be very, very far away, because we still haven't resolved the inherent difficulties that humans have in getting along with each other.
Yeah, it's still us after, you peel away all the technology and all the whatever artificial or man-made devices, it's still us. It's still
us.
the
Yeah.
same old problem that humanity has faced for thousands of years, which is arriving at a society, an arrangement where everyone is happy and contented, and because just one man's nightmare is another man's dream come true, right? Or woman. And that,
and even if we all had similar desires, like let's say I like chocolate ice cream and you like vanilla ice cream, and we're having an ice cream party and there can only be one kind of ice cream. Okay, there might be a conflict there. But even if we all have the same desires, some people are going to be more talented, some people are going to be less talented. That already kind of leads to a conflict, because some people will think that they should deserve more. Some people will think they. So yeah, just situations like that, I think, just get in the way of a utopia.
yeah.
Well, I think one thing that for me, it's part of my idea of utopia is the idea that we need to be solidary with each other, that we should treat each other as being part of a community. And I see that as part of what I see as utopian, because I think that's how we should behave as a community. I think we should help each other. I think we should think of each other's well-being, not just our own. And this is not just saying some nice thing. I really think this is this should be a principle in society. I think that this is an important principle if we are going to pursue a utopian society. But it's not a principle that is always used in our society today in the 21st century.
No.
And in fact, there's a lot of people that think that's not a good principle at all.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big difference there in the way people think. And I think that if we're not using the principle of solidarity, if we're using the principle of selfishness,
Or tribalism,
that's a bad thing. That's that's, in my view, that really constitutes a problem. Like what you're saying, Michael, what are those things in human nature that impede us, right? To me, that's one problem. It's that selfishness, which is entirely normal. Like selfishness is a part of all of us. But as a community, I think that's not a good principle to go by. Right. And it's the driving principle that we have today. I would argue probably, in the way our societies are organized, selfishness is not the driving principle, but it's one of the driving principles, the principle of selfishness.
So you have to have a community, but with no individuals like here. So
no. But I think individuality, you can have individuality, but what I'm saying is that, well, I think in fact you should have individuality.
I guess it's like a contradiction which can be resolved. Like we are selfish, but
well, it's all about balance.
At the same, we're like the whole and the part simultaneously. So we're like as individuals, we're the whole, and as a part of society, we are, we're the part of society, and we are programmed like with these both features. So it's like your emotions and your reason. Basically, like your reason, it's mostly oriented towards society. Like you kind of, operate in a way that is beneficial for society by using reason, logic, and trying to figure out what's going on. And your emotions is basically like your drives to like your personal survival. And there's always contradiction between them. So I think this is the rational thing to do, since it's going to lead to, you don't think that, but it seems like if you reflect on it, then you may see that, it's like I've done a certain action, and it was not beneficial for me, but it was beneficial for society. And I just choose to act according to my reason and suppress my emotions. Or in a different situation, it's going to be otherwise. You're going to choose to act according to your emotions and to sacrifice some social part of you. And I guess finding the balance, like proper balance here, is one of the key points but you can do it you can teach everybody, like it's only on a personal level. So you may create an environment around you where you may interact with people, when you may treat them in a way which you like, and you are going to be treated in the same way probably.
Well,
But
Yeah.
well, like,
as long as it gets to like societies where there are like millions or billions of people, I guess we're all always going to be in this hierarchy. So it's always like there's elite on top and masses on the bottom, and like.
No, I don't think it's that complicated. The conflict between individualism and communitarianism. I think most people understand that it's okay to be selfish. Just don't be too selfish, right? It just goes down to that. And I think,
but the idea, the more selfish you are, the higher you go on this hierarchy, and most people understand that as well, or they feel that. So if you're selfish, you just grow up and you become, you dominate masses, and it's or you suppress that and you become a mass, and it's like this.
Right. But it's also up to the masses if they allow themselves to be browbeaten that way. But yeah, I mean, this happens all the time.
Well, I mean, today at least we're talking about utopia, right? So I think the question is, like, we're talking about education before. We talked a little bit about politics, about technology, but I would say the selfish thing that we see, it's not just that, but I think the selfish aspect that is a very important principle in our current organization. It translates a lot to economics, and it's not just economics. I mean, it translates into other aspects of society, but our economic system, I think, as a general rule for this planet, I think it's not utopian. I think I mean, it could be worse, but it's certainly not utopian, and we're pretty far from utopia at this point. And it depends on the country, obviously.
Right.
But I think that it's way too selfish. It's way too selfish at the moment. And there are many people that are in need of things and they don't have them. And there are some people that just accumulate everything. And I think that's a problem of balance. And it's not what I would say is the ideal state of things for a utopian society. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but in principle, that's my understanding.
Yeah, but we don't have any better system right now, so it seems that.
Well, we're talking about having a better system, right? We're talking about having a utopian system.
Something.
Yeah.
So we may never achieve it. It probably won't, but we should always keep on striving.
I was listening.
Society.
I was listening. A man, he wrote a book, Utopia for Realists. I forgot his name, but you may check it out on YouTube. And he was basically talking about this idea of universal basic income.
Right.
And so he kind of suggested that, this famous idea that everybody gets free, like certain amount of money that is enough to survive, and then you may do creative work, you may do whatever you like. And since there's, we have these robots, we have these,
Andrew Yang, was it him or?
Andrew,
Look,
he's just a big proponent.
It was Ruth. I'll check it like a few seconds.
I get emails from Andrew Yang's campaign every day. So he might actually win the race for mayor of New York. If he does win the race for mayor of New York, I think we might have UBI in New York.
It was Rutger Bregman.
There's a chance. There's a good chance.
That would be awesome.
Rutger Bregman. I'll post a link on the chat.
Rutger Bregman.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah, Dutch historian.
Yeah, and he wrote a book like this book. I managed to listen the first chapter, an audio book, and there was he seems to be very like he read lots of literature about utopia, and there's so much literature. Like I watched, I checked up this list of utopian literature, and I wrote like 5, 6, almost 10 books which I want to read now on on this subject.
Yes.
It's so broad, and so many people have wrote. Like it's from a historical point, it's kind of interesting to see how different ideas which were proposed like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, how they later influenced society and how it changed its direction. But now I think there's so many people who write books, and if we think about the future, right now somebody probably writes a utopia which is gonna, like, in next 10 years is going to be implemented, and then people go backwards and find out this like somebody who predicted it. And it seems that right now there's so much content, so much information, and if like certainly if, like, let's suppose like 1 million people writes something about utopia, one of them certainly will guess maybe with like 90% of accuracy, or maybe 95% of accuracy, what's going to happen next. And then you get back and read what was written. And it's so exciting, like, to see how it works. But in history, we have many examples of that, when somebody was writing something and then suddenly this almost the same what he predicted occurred.
Mhm.
I was thinking about writing, like trying to write my own utopia like this week. Not a big book, but just few articles, trying to figure out like how would I describe it. Maybe write 10, 15, 20 pages, like short, and see how it's gonna change my understanding of the ideal society and how I can imagine it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a popular topic in philosophy, right? That's the Republic. It's the Republic of Plato is his version of utopia.
Actually,
a fascist country.
I wanted to ask this question about in Plato's Republic, there is an idea that philosophers have to rule, and the first thing we have, like, those people who are not philosophers,
Right.
they discuss society, philosophers, warriors, teachers, whatever.
Yeah.
The whole idea is that, for me, it seems that I consider myself as a philosopher to some extent, and I think like ruling isn't what I want to do. So it's like, in my understanding, like, I don't like to rule, I like to learn.
Right.
And many philosophers, I guess, they have a kind of similar worldview. So you don't want to rule people, you want to just understand and learn something, and basically develop your curiosity. Whereas ruling requires responsibility, it requires like different mindset, basically. And how you make philosophers to rule, it's a very complex question. Like, philosophers don't want to rule, but it seems that if we are talking about Plato's Republic,
and he was given the chance to sort of set up this ideal republic in Syracuse.
Yeah, and
right?
He failed
because the what do we call it? The king or the monarch of Syracuse basically kicked him out after.
Yeah, and he was actually influenced by this guy Pythagoras. And this guy wanted, like, he established his own cult and special society.
And he was also influenced by Sparta, because his ideal republic is very similar, not a complete carbon copy, but very similar to the Spartan social arrangements is set up in Sparta, where you have the children growing up in communal housing and things like that, And
yeah, I mean, his idea of an ideal society is perhaps what we would see as a little bit as a totalitarian society.
Yeah.
From that perspective. But
It's
look, I
basically-
mean, Spartan society, like you said, was a totalitarian society, and
Right.
it worked. I mean, it worked very well for in some ways, right?
For a few generations, right, until
Yeah.
they basically died out because
Well, I mean, it was more than that. I would say it was several
Yeah.
centuries.
yeah, maybe, yeah, but they did actually get snuffed out in the last war, where they had only how many hundreds of Spartans left.
Yeah,
And,
but it's
you
also, I
know.
mean, the Greeks in general declined quite a bit. It wasn't just Sparta, but yeah, I mean,
No, yeah,
I mean, all good things must come to an end. That's also true, you know.
right.
It seems to be on like a pattern in history. So for like not first, but we start, let's suppose, from one king, and like the whole power is like the king possesses whole power, but
Mhm.
then it degenerates to a kind of aristocracy. There are like many people who wield power, and then like it degenerates even further, becomes democracy. And according to like Asians, like Aristotle, for example, democracy was the worst form of government. But then like another king comes, unites all people, and it's
Yeah.
like the pattern just goes on and on. So plus we choose now we are living in kind of democracy, and democracy is kind of ideal state, but it's not, it's probably not gonna last forever. Then we're gonna like totalitarian states will come, replace it, and then they
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
fall apart. Yeah, and
most societies throughout civilization are not democratic. You know, most societies are oligarchic or monarchic, and it's only, you have the brief period of Athenian democracy, which was only democracy for men, of Athenian and Athenian citizens, and then Western Europe and the United States, and from there, the other spread to other countries. But we don't know if it's something that's sustainable. We hope it is. I hope it is. But
I mean, there was
who
also
knows?
the Roman Republic.
Yeah, which then degenerated into
in
an empire. Yeah.
Yeah,
Middle Ages there was Florence, and
Yeah, to be
Mhm.
fair, yeah, those are kind of overlooked a little bit. But Florence was the democracy, and
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but although the thing, those were very imperfect democracies. For example, Florence was not entirely a democracy. It was
Yeah.
more of a aristocracy more than anything else, and Venice was really more of an oligarchy than.
Mhm.
than
yeah, but it all again depends on how you define things, right? We can say that now, like democracy, that all people have power. You may vote, but still, who there's limited options, and it's all determined by money. And
For sure,
those
yeah.
people who have money, they basically win the election.
Yeah. And you know, like some people say that, you know, not even like current democracies are democracies, but what I'm saying is that those democracies are pretty far removed from even what we have, you know, like in Florence, I think it was just
The Medicis.
it was the most important families at the time, you know, so it wasn't really that everybody could have a say, you know. It was the important families could have a say, which is, yeah, to some extent democratic, but it's not like generalized democracy, right? Like it was in Athens or Rome,
Yeah.
and like our systems. Same thing in Venice, you know. So but there were, you know, so there were some, but certainly like in modern times, that's really the big time of democracy. This is the age of democracy, and it remains to be seen if it will triumph or not overall.
Collapses tomorrow. It's had a pretty good run, like at least a couple hundred, like what, 200 whatever years. That's a good run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, compared to civilization, which is about
Yeah.
5,000 years.
Considering our whole
maybe.
history, it's a
You know,
Yeah.
but you know,
For-
as I said,
Yeah, I think it may be interesting to analyze like modern utopias, like how people write about the power. So these higher, is it democratic utopia, or it's more kind of, monarchic utopia, or oligarchic or aristocratic utopia? So you may see this tendency, like when, like for example, Thomas More wrote his Utopia. It's more was oriented on democracy,
Right.
and at his time, like democracy was kind of popular idea, and they started developing it, and then eventually we established this kind of global order. But now it's more like when you read, it's not necessarily should be dystopia, but there are like some utopias which we have constitutional monarchy, and when there's some one ruler and the people are kind of more organized around certain principles which are not necessarily democratic. So I mean, like democracy also may exhaust itself, and then we'll have a different forms of society which gets more popular just because people want some changes.
Yeah.
And
I feel like a lot of the common ways we think of utopia, I think a lot of people might just find them boring. Like where there's like a lot of the ways that utopia is written about in books, it's like a society of people that all cooperates and gets along, and they just have a very stable, consistent way of living, and they're just sort of content with that. And I think a lot of people, at least a lot of people, would find that boring. Like they sometimes view like some people like competition, or they like sort of chaos, and they view that as an opportunity to like add more value in the world. And they would just be bored with just this very stable, cooperative society.
There's no place for creativity, right? You have everything you need, and everybody likes you, and basically life makes no sense otherwise, just getting more and more pleasure, which like has no purpose.
When things are chaotic, you can kind of capitalize on that, right? So you can I don't know, like with COVID, if someone in your family's sick, that's like an opportunity to help them out. Or you can like donate masks, or you can advocate for certain policy by the government. But it's like chaos is almost an opportunity to like give your own voice on things and try to help out. Whereas if everything is sort of stable and everyone's sort of cooperative, there's sort of less opportunity to add value, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's like nature of the universe, since it's infinite, and there's always chaos around. So you may create borders, you may organize a certain activity inside these borders, but outside, if you have to go outside, and outside there's like the whole infinite world, which you may just reorganize and create something new.
The principle of entropy is not just a concept in physics. I think it's certainly works, of course, in a different way with societies, with human relations, and you really have to work hard to prevent societies and lives from descending into chaos. I sincerely believe that you can't sit still. You always have to be striving to prevent society from descending into disorder. And that takes a lot of energy. Yeah.
Just let me ask a final question, and then maybe it's time to wrap it up. But what do you guys think would be, if you're from your perspective, what's in utopian, going forward, at least in the future, what's the utopian political system? What's the best possible system that we can use?
I'll go last.
I mean, it's a difficult question, but I guess if you try to answer like in 1 minute, right? Like
no, I'd answer that I can answer that right away. I'd say for me, the ideal, the utopian political system has to be democratic, but then I would qualify it looking at various societies and around the world it's not going to work for everyone.
Mhm.
You know, there's, as I said, there's certain prerequisites for the citizenry to possess in terms of attitude, education, and things like that for a democracy to work. That's the ideal, but there's no guarantee that it works for all societies. That's my.
I think it's going to be completely totalitarian, like in terms of, artificial intelligence is going to take over, and we are going to lose our ability to think, like consciousness.
Is that your?
It's not utopia. That's a dystopia.
That sounds like a dystopia. Is that
No, why? No. Look, we'll have no consciousness, and therefore will not suffer. We don't understand anything. But this one thing, this the like artificial intelligence, is basically will have ultimate power, and it's going to be the only thing that is going to perceive
there
everything.
already? I mean,
No. Look, no, you still have consciousness.
This is like this dominates everybody. You just don't know Vladimir because you don't have one yet.
No,
He hasn't gone far enough.
He's talking about Skynet.
There's one difference. If this thing is going to be you, now you perceive yourself as Bruno, right? Or as Michael, or as Raul, or as Vladimir. Yeah. But at this moment, you'll say, I am this like iPhone. And there's no there like you basically will consider yourself as a finger, like, or as a as a part of you. But
it'll be like attached to the forehead,
Vladimir is proving my belief that it's a thin line between utopia and dystopia.
It is.
Yeah. Very thin line.
What about you, Michael? What's your I still don't know if Vladimir really answered the question. I think it's a dystopia, not a dystopia. Look, we talked about both, so it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I have no idea, honestly. Like, I just find the question overwhelming. Maybe a society that's like a little more equitable than our current society. But I feel like community is kind of important, and I feel like maybe like today, like a lot of organizations that people used to join have broken down a little bit. Yeah. So kind of taking us back to our conversation on community. So I think if we could like restore that somehow, that would be a step forward. But yeah, as for a political system, maybe a democracy that's slightly more equitable than the current one. Not like where everyone makes the same, but
right.
Maybe a little bit more equitable. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Scandinavian democracies are a lot more equitable.
Right.
It's not.
I mean, they don't exist. You have to have a democracy where people don't have the mindset that I am going to use the democracy to get as much as I can for myself. It's just too many people in this democracy who think that way. That's what I think.
But even if we made it more equitable, I don't think that would be the solution to all our problems. I think we'd still have a lot of, strife and, disagreement. I think it would be very far from a utopia. And it's just the best. It's maybe just the best that I can personally think of. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think when scientists are gonna take over, it's like more. Now we live in a what's the word? Late stage of capitalism. So the whole idea now is basically for many people that the meaning of life is just to earn money and work and whatever, raise family. But the whole idea is like money, right? So society is like all these social interactions are basically centered on this idea of money. And when we shift this idea to the idea of knowledge, so like the meaning of life is not going to be to earn lots of money, but to get like more education, to learn more stuff, to be like, to maybe to create something. That's probably kind of utopian society. So everybody just strives for, for knowledge instead of striving for money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That'd be
wanted to
nice.
say, like, a lot of people say, like, the problem with our society is that there's the super rich and the super poor. And if we could make things more equitable, then society would be so much greater.
No,
My view is it would be better, but that's only a little bit of the problem. And so I think it would be a good thing to make it more equitable, but I think that's very far from getting us to like the place we want. That's just like a tiny piece.
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
I played this game like fools versus wise men. So in the whole on the same there's the same spectrum, like as you mentioned, like poor and rich, and there's like stupid and wise. So we need to we need to get more towards like wise men and become more wise on a social level.
Well, when we have more time, we got to talk about this game. I think that's an interesting. I
Yeah.
want to hear more about this game. This game sounds.
But the problem is like the more you play this game,
The stupider you get. Or how about you, Bruno? What is your conception?
For me, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it's a very difficult question to say, like, what utopia would look like. I could do it, but it would take me 2 hours to say what
Sure.
utopia would look like in general. I mean, that's in terms of a political system. I don't think it's actually that difficult for me to envision like what I think would work the best, because partially because I think we already have most of what works the best. I think liberal democracy, it took us thousands of years to get here, and I think
Yeah.
really the best system we've come up with. It's a liberal democracy. Also, federalism has worked tremendously well in the United States, and then now the way it's being applied in the European Union, I think it has worked very well as well. Still needs work, but essentially improve liberal democracy, improve federalism, create a world governance, a federal system of world governance that works, um, make institutions more stable to protect people and protect people against too much power and to, you know, essentially to protect people in the different ways that people need to be protected, and try to make it as stable as possible. I think that would be the best way to basically govern society, govern the world. Now it's easier said than done, but
Yeah.
I mean, we certainly are much closer to that than we were, you know, even 100 years ago. So I don't think it's impossible. Actually, I think that would be the best sensible, like politically, in terms of a political system.
Yeah, but I think we kind of moved away the last 20 years, but maybe we can.
No, I mean, you're
can
right.
get back
You're
on
right.
track.
But
Yeah.
hopefully we can go back to that route, because I think that's
Yeah.
the route that it would serve humanity by far the best.
Hmm.
So that's the short answer. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I think. Anyways, that's it for Utopia and Dystopia. Next week we'll have a different topic altogether. I forgot what the next topic is, but you know, we'll come back.
I guess it's language.
Language. Oh, that's
Language.
that's an
Oh,
interesting one.
that's lovely.
Yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
a good discussion. I'm
Yeah.
excited. So
Yeah.
you can watch us next Friday. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you. And